evening. It's a great day to be alive. It's going to be a fun night tonight as Rena and I continue to have some fun interaction up here with you guys. If you're online watching, we're so glad that you're participating with us here tonight. So it's going to be a fun night. I want to pray, and we're going to get rolling, okay? Father, thank you for today. Thank you for breath, for life, for energy. Thank you that we're fearfully and wonderfully made. We're loved by the God of all creation that created us in his image. And so we give you praise and glory just for being who you are, that you would desire to meet with us. You would desire for us to meet with you. And I do pray that this would be a refreshing time. I pray that it would be a good time of growth for all of us as we contemplate our lives before you. Guide us now, I pray, in Jesus' name. Amen. So Rena and I were interacting and kind of chatting about what we're going to talk about tonight. She did not send me a text this morning saying she changed her mind, which was, no, that was good. But we're going to talk about tonight male and female differences. It's very interesting when you get into it. Now, scripturally speaking, God created us intentionally male and female. That was God's blueprint and game plan. And we're going with what God says. We're going to put on the belt of truth as we do life. We're going to walk in righteousness. We're going to make sure we've got on some shoes of peace when we interact with others. But this is going to be a fun time for us. So kick it off a little bit, and let's get rolling on the differences between male and female.
Yeah. This is probably one of my favorite topics to talk to anybody about. And I could make like a couple month series on this because it's a lot of information. But, you know, I think we can definitely scratch the surface and get a good, just insight as to those differences. We live in a world that tells us that we are all equal. And although I do agree we were created equal, we were also created different. And so when we confuse the two, when we look at what society tells us, that we are all equal, and so because of that, we should all behave the same and look the same and do the same things, then we're ignoring the design that God had and what he intended. And it's really, when we get married and we come together, male and female, right, we become one. Echad, that word means one, right? That's when we really get that image of God. So me by myself, I'm not a complete image of God. I'm not that creation that it's me and my husband that now together, right? And that's because we're meant to complement each other. So I'm going to give you guys a little kind of biology overview on the brain, just because this is really interesting. Well, at least I find it interesting. Okay, so the brain, when you're in utero, your brain is a female brain, okay? So everybody starts out with a female brain. And at about 5 to 6 weeks gestation is when testosterone starts to be produced in the body. And it's the amount of testosterone that gets produced that will determine whether you stay female or male, right? So that's the case for gender as well, right? So in order for your brain to be a male brain, there has to be 10 to 20 times more testosterone during that pregnancy than with a female pregnancy. Does that make sense? Isn't that like wild? Like I just was like, that's crazy, right? So with that being said, that tells us that there's all kinds of ranges of brain. So when we say the male brain and the female brain, yeah, there is some truth to that, but it's like a continuum, right? You have like the extreme female brain and you have the extreme male brain, and there's actually something called the bridge brain, and that's actually a brain that has characteristics of both male and female. And so, and everyone, that's like in the middle, right? And so we're all somewhere along the line, right? So this is why some women are really good at spatial stuff, right? Even though that's supposed to be more of a male-dominated trait, right? And this is why some male will sit and chat, right? Because they're more towards the middle, right? And so that's important to know because I think when we talk about, when we use terms like equality, right? We're equal. Even all men are not the same. Even there's differences between men. But for the sake of consistency, I will just say like the male brain, the female brain, but keep in mind that there are some, variances even within the male brain and the female brain. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And then you factor in personality and all this stuff we'll get
Right.
to as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then that's a whole other layer, right? So you've got things that are just characteristics of having a female brain, and then you add personality, right? So I was telling Tim the other day, I had a couple that came in, and they had the same, we did a personality test. They had the same exact personality, right? And they sat there and they looked at each other and they're like, why can't we get along? Well, because their personality came out, but through the female perspective, and then the other side through the male perspective. And that was just enough of a difference to have them clash, even though they had the same personality. So that's a whole other layer of stuff. Okay, so the male brain tends to process everything through gray matter. So we have gray matter and white matter. Gray matter is all like inside, and the white matter is everything that's outside of the gray matter. Other than showing you a brain, I'm not going to get too technical on that, but you just need to know that. So, and the reason why that's important is because the gray matter is on when you're using it. The white matter is on all the time. So that takes us to other things, okay? Because I hear often women complain about their husbands, or even, women complain about their fathers or their brothers. And part of it is because we don't understand each other because our brains function differently, right? So that's important to know. So the white matter is a lot of the word processing, right? Women process words on both sides of the brain. Men process language on only one side of the brain. So women, this is why when you say, can we talk? It doesn't resonate with them the way it does with your girlfriend because they don't process language on both sides of their brain, right? And so we have to be aware of that so we don't get hurt or offended that they don't want to just sit and chat and tell us about their day, right? That's not how they process language. So that's one of the big things. Males process reading and writing only on the left. And so this is why, too, we see boys struggle in school. And we've created all kinds of diagnoses for this, right? But really, it's just a boy functioning with the male brain. And so if we were just to accept that and let boys learn the way that their brain needs them to learn, then we wouldn't be labeling them ADHD, learning disabilities, all that kind of stuff, right? And I see the difference in my kids. I have a son and I have a daughter. Now, my daughter's only 3, but the difference in how they sit and do stuff is so different. My son can work on a puzzle, but in a few minutes, he'll start bouncing around, standing up, sitting down, sitting, working on the puzzle, wiggling, right? My daughter can sit still and work on the puzzle until she finishes it, right? That's just because of how their brain works, right? So the male brain, if you think about it functioning on the gray matter, if it's not on, it shuts off. So if your brain shuts off, then you're going to go to sleep, right? So I explained this to Tim the other day, and we had a good laugh about it. But, we often see this happen, and I'm sure I could say how many of you ladies have a man in your life that can just sit on the couch and fall asleep like that. Anybody want to raise your hand and admit to that? Yeah, right? Okay. So the reason why that happens is because of it's gray matter, right? So if it's not on, if there's no need for it, it's going to shut off. We're women, because we're white matter processing, that's always on. And I'm going to show you guys some images in a second to kind of give you a visual of that. But because it's always on, we tend to have the experience of we sit down, and all of a sudden, everything that's in our head is loud. And that's when we start thinking. I see a lot of women nodding. Yeah, so that's different, right? So we can't just lay down and fall asleep like nothing, right? So one of the things that happens with boys and with men, we see a lot of men fidget. Can you guys connect with that? Right? Like we've got all kinds of stuff for that. Fidget spinners, fidget, things. So that's the male brain starting to fidget because it values what it's engaging in, whether it's school, parents, teachers, a show, right, whatever, the puzzle. And so their brain is doing that to keep their brain on. So that was huge for me. And so I have to constantly remind myself that when I see my son who's working on something and he's sitting up and he's standing up, sitting down, wiggling, and I have to not say, stop moving, right? I have to remember that, okay, he's trying to keep his brain on because he wants to be able to read that book, right? It's frustrating because I don't function that way, but it's an understanding that then he doesn't feel like he's doing something wrong because it's just his brain doing what it needs to do to stay on.
So when she was talking with me about this the other day, all right, I remember when we first got married, we went to Toronto, where Barb's originally from, her mom and dad. We were going to spend Christmas with them. All right, this is totally foreign because I'm from Noonan. My dad did drywall. Mom worked in an elementary school, 8th grade education, 10th grade through school. I go up there. Her dad is the general treasurer for the Anglican Church of Canada. Her mom is a librarian, and this is a beautiful mix right here. So we get there. They're all fired up because they've got this 1,000-piece puzzle that they're going to put together. At the Cash House, we have never put together a puzzle in our life. Around Christmas, you always found gymnasiums. You and the boys got together, and you were going to go play ball. So it's like, we've got this puzzle. We're going to put it together. They were all happy. And I thought, I am in purgatory. What have I gotten into? Because I'm like, is there any gyms around here where I can go shoot basketball or do something? And so when she started sharing this the other day, I got that image in my mind. I'm like, well, there's nothing wrong with what they wanted to do. And there was nothing wrong with what I wanted to do. But the thought of sitting there, and I told Rena, I said, I promise you, now being born in 1962, going through elementary school in the 60s, early 70s, I said, Rena, honestly, if they would have treated kids during my time the way they started treating them in the later 70s, 80s, whatever, I said they would have thrown me on Ritalin in a heartbeat. Because there's something in culture, to me, where I've seen the emasculation of the male. We got to calm him down. He's too wired. It's not too wired. So I was at a conference years ago, and there's a lady by the name of Cynthia Tobias. And she's a counselor, psychologist kind of girl. And she had written a book called The Way They Learn. All right, she's speaking at this conference, and this was like so good to me. So she said, I have twin boys. And the teacher was bragging on the one twin. He is so good at school. He makes all A's. He's always attentive. The other one, I mean, we try to corral him. It's so difficult. She said, let me try something with him. Give me the test. She said, I take the test. We go out to the track. We walk around the track, and I ask him the questions that are on the test. She said he scored higher than the one who sat there because he's got to be moving. So I told Rena, I said, the interesting thing, even when you share the way the brain is different, Barb, honestly, she's an avid reader. She can sit in her room and read a book for 3 or 4 hours or 8 hours. When I'm study prepping, after about 45 minutes, I have got to get up, walk up the driveway. I got to go clear it out. I got to turn on Sports Center. I got to turn on the MLB network. I got to defrag. And then I can come back in and land. And when I land, I'm good for about 45 minutes. But if you told me I had to sit there and read for 5 straight hours, I wouldn't be able to retain anything. And I started looking back with making a 550 on the SAT when I came out of high school. I'm like, you're just dumb as a brick. I never was permitted under the system to learn the way I learned. I was forced to learn the way they taught. And as a result of that, I thought, I had these mind monsters. That's one of the things where I had to put on the belt of truth and understand that I could walk in God's truth. But I was labeled that you're going to have to take remedial 099 when you first go to college, this and that. But I finally learned how I learned, and I was like, I'm good. I've never been stupid, but yet I thought I was. So all this stuff she was talking about, the way the brain is different, I'm like, you can't put some boys, some guys, even guys, you can't put us there and block us in. Like Barb, when we would go to spring training, even when I was doing sports ministry, they would go and get a library card in spring training. She goes, I used to love just flipping through the, what do you call that, the catalog thing? Yeah. What is it?
The catalog,
card catalog. I'm like, I don't even know what that is. We were so different, just the way we're wired. So yeah, when she was saying this the other day, I'm like, I am so right there with you. I'm so, why we need to understand the different wiring, and that Cynthia Tobias introduced me, and then Carolyn Leaf reading some of her stuff has really helped me as well.
Yeah, so I'm going to show you guys a couple images. The first one is going to have 4 pictures of the brain, and I'm going to explain them to you so you guys can kind of see the differences in how I'm describing. So we'll just give it a minute. On the screen, you're going to notice on the, so you have it's your left side, you have the color coding. So anything that is red, yellow, orange, that's primary blood flow. Okay, so that means that the brain is on, it's hot, right? That's why it shows up red. Anything that is purple, light purple, there's three different colors of purple. That means secondary blood flow. So that means there's some blood flow, but the brain's not hot. So it's not necessarily on, right? It's getting some blood flow, but the brain is not like, it's not necessarily like the primary thing that it's using. The blue, it means the brain is off. Okay, so there's no blood flow going there, so that part is shut down, okay? So if you notice the top left corner and the bottom left brain, the top is a male brain resting, the bottom is a female brain resting. You guys are already laughing. Do you see the difference, right? Guys, this is why your wife or your friend, girls that are friends, your sisters, whatever, you're trying to relax and they sit down and relax and they go, you know what I was thinking? Because their brain does not shut off. And this isn't even sleep, this is rest, right? So this is you like chilling on the couch. Like we have secondary blood flow throughout our whole brain and primary blood flow going. And so if you notice, the male brain, so the bottom part of the brain, that's going to be the frontal lobe, right? And the part that you see purple and the part that you see red in the male brain, that's your central nervous system. So basically, if you're just relaxing and your brain starts to shut down, your brain's only trying to keep you alive. Ladies, that's why he doesn't respond when you say, what do you want for dinner? That part of his brain that needs to listen is not on. Okay, so touch him, say, hun, what would you like for dinner? Because that touch is going to wake his brain up, right? And you'll get a better response than, getting angry because you think he's not hearing you. He literally is not hearing you. And it's funny because I used to say, oh, yeah, right, like I know they are hearing, but you know what? Like they don't. And I even see it in my son. Like he could be watching TV, so I know he's in resting mode because he's just like this, right? And I'm like, buddy, right? Nothing. But if I get in front of him and cut the view, or I touch him, then he's like, yeah? Like what? Like, what's happening, right? So it's really off. So I think that has been big. Anytime, just for me alone, understanding that, right? But anytime I show this to clients or even just friends, it just brings up so many aha moments. And then I'll tell you what, like, I would love to have a male brain sometimes, because I would just love to be able to just shut off. But we weren't gifted that. The second one is verbal, okay? So for all us ladies who want to engage in conversations all the time with the males in our lives, this is why it's hard, okay? So the top brain is the male brain. Notice what parts of the brain are hot. Remember what I said, the left side of the brain? They process language on one side of the brain. So when you're engaging in a verbal task, look at that bottom brain. Look what is hot for you. You're all brain right there. Your whole brain is on when you are talking or engaging in a verbal task. So I think when we can understand these things, then we don't get offended, we don't get hurt, because that other person, whether it's, our fathers, our sons, our, brothers,
wives,
our husbands, we don't get offended because they're not, responding the way that we would respond, because they are different. So, yeah.
Yeah, so talking through this, I don't know if this is your house, but I can go to sleep. When I lay down, within 20 to 30 seconds, I'll fall asleep. I'm like, I love you, I'm going to sleep, good night. She'll go, good night. We wake up the next morning, I get up early, I'm out doing my thing, and often I'll go, how'd you sleep last night? I couldn't turn my brain off. And I sit there and go, why couldn't you turn it off? Why don't you just turn it off? I have to really figure out how to turn mine on. Why can't you just turn yours off? And she will tell me, it drives me crazy that you can fall asleep like that. Hey, I'm going to grab the pillow on Sunday. I'm going to go out and lay on the couch. Hey, y'all don't be slamming doors around here. I need to take a nap. I turn golf on, even like this past week. She goes, how can you sleep with the TV on? How can I sleep with it on? I got my pillow, and within seconds, I glance up, and I'm like, bam. And it drives her crazy. It does. And so when she was saying this the other day, well, I laid down, but I just couldn't go to sleep. Well, why didn't you just take a nap? So when Rena was breaking down the brain for me the other day, I'm like, this is so good. This makes so much sense. Because I can't get mad at her for not falling asleep, but don't get mad at me for falling asleep. And we've even had those times where I was talking to you and you fell asleep. Are you serious? Well, what was the last thing you said? We'll pick it up right now. I'm going to wait.
Well, it's funny because, from the female side, Chris and I would be laying there and he'd be like, okay, good night, babe. And then I'm like, oh, you're going to go to sleep now? Like, I just wanted 10 minutes to talk about something, right? I won't get it. If it's time to go to sleep, the male brain's going to shut off, and I'm going to explain a little bit also why that happens, a little bit, later. But let me show you the second scan, the second images. These are just a different type of scan. And so, but it shows you the same thing. So it's just there's no color here, but you can see all the white is what's on. And the left, you see the left is the female brain, and it's got different parts of the brain on. This is resting mode. And then the male brain, again, it's only the central nervous system. So, there's definitely something to that. But, all right, so, so let's talk a little bit about how we kind of approach things, because this is one that I hear a lot about, not just clients, but I think everyone that I ever talk to, we start talking about relationships, this starts coming up. So we do live in a society that has emasculated men, and we know that. We've it's all over sitcoms, it's all over movies, everything. You know, if you notice, the dad is always the dumb dad, the one that's out to lunch. He doesn't have a clue. They always pull the wool over his eyes. You know, always. They've kind of taken what is male and made it negative, right? And it's not that the male is dumb, easy to fool, not at all. But what they've taken is something that men are single-focused, right? So men will focus on one goal at a time. How many of you guys can connect with that? Yeah, all of you. So when a man has a goal in mind, guess what? He can actually multitask inside of that to accomplish the goal. So we like to think that we're the only ones that can multitask and men can't. Well, men can actually multitask as long as what they're doing is towards that one goal, right? So when they focus on one goal at a time, everything they do is going to be towards that, right? Women, I heard someone describe it, like we have this diffuse awareness, right? So almost like scan vision, right? And I even read somewhere that when you look at the peripheral visions between a male and a female, females have a wider peripheral vision than men do. And I think that goes along with this. So that means that we're aware of everything. That doesn't mean you know everything, so be careful with that, ladies, because we don't know everything, but we're aware of everything. And the example I'll give you is, you could be walking through your house and you see, let's say, the rubber ducky on the second step of your house, right? And an hour later, your kid says, "Do you know where my rubber ducky is?" And without thinking, you say it's on the second step. And it's because you noticed it, right? Men don't notice those things. Not because they can't, it's because if it's not their goal, they have no need for it, right? So they can look at it, but it's not going to register like it's on the second step because they have no need for that if it's not towards their goal. So the example I gave Tim was, we can be, my husband and I could be with the kids, just gone grocery shopping. We're driving home. We both have to use the bathroom. Right? So his goal is driving home to use the bathroom, right? So we get to the house, we pull into the driveway, he opens up the garage, he's already taking his seatbelt off, right? We pull all the way in, he gets out of the car, turns off the car, gets out of the car immediately, and beelines it to the bathroom. Meanwhile, I also have to use the bathroom, right? But I'm in the car, I start unloading the kids, I start unloading the groceries, I get in the house, I start putting the groceries away. I get the kids a snack, right? And before I know it, an hour has passed, and I go, oh, I still have to use the bathroom, right? Part of this is because of this, men are goal-focused, right? If you have one goal, you're going to do everything you need to do to accomplish that goal, right? And women, because of that diffuse awareness, we're going to prioritize whatever is the loudest. So in that scenario, my kids are going to be the loudest, right? And then after that, all the groceries that can go bad that are cold in the car are going to be the loudest. And then I can't just bring them in. I got to put them away, right? So that's the difference in that scenario. So if I didn't understand that, I'd be like, why do you leave me alone in the car with the kids? And you guys are laughing because I'm sure you guys have had this conversation. Because there's times where I've thought it, like, I have to go too. It'd be easier if we just got everything out, right? But in understanding that he's just trying to accomplish that one goal, every time he's done, he comes back and helps. So it's not like he's leaving me alone. He's just trying to accomplish the one goal that he had in mind. Does that make sense? Can you guys connect with that? Yeah? Yeah.
Dustin, to which I responded, that's why you need to live in the country where there's bushes, and when you jump out, you ain't got to worry about anybody seeing you.
I'm from California.
And then
we don't do that.
get the kids out. It's like, all right, I got to get the kids out.
Yeah, we don't do that in California. So then that leads us then to also not just goals, but then, men are needs driven. And women, we are driven by our sense of safety and security. So let me explain that. So for a woman, the whole kind of thing that she focuses everything on is whether she feels safe. Now, we may not think about it, but we do it without thinking about it, right? Safe physically, emotionally, psychologically, all of it. Anything can rock our safety boat. And when it does is when we will respond with control. So we do a couple things when our safety has been threatened. We soothe, right? Whether it's our father, our husband, our boyfriend, our friends, we will try to soothe. So this is that codependency, right? If I try to manipulate, make sure that you're okay, then I can be okay, right? Trying to get my safety back in check. We try to please or distract. We emasculate men. So if it's our husband, like in that scenario, I'd be like, what, you think I don't have to go to the bathroom, right? Do you think your needs are more important than mine? And I'll start kind of the cutting them down, right? We do that, and that comes out of our safety being threatened. And the other thing is we leave. We either leave emotionally, psychologically, or physically, but we check out, right? So we stop talking to them, we start engaging in conversations, and that also is not good, right? So men being needs-driven, everything is going to be a priority for them when it's a need. So in that scenario, not only is he goal-focused, right? One goal at a time, the goal to use the bathroom, but there's a need there, right? The fact that the bathroom is a need, that's going to take priority over any other goal that can come up, right? Because it's a need. The other thing is that men need to be needed. Ladies, I'm going to say that again. Men need to be needed. And I'm not saying that in a way of they need you to be needed. They need you to genuinely need them, right? So we live in a world that is sending women the message that we don't need men. We shouldn't need men. When I was in high school, there was a teacher who had a sticker in her car, bumper sticker that said, women need men like fish need a bicycle. It's like, wow, okay. So I grew up in this very feminist, and it's not even as bad as it is now, right? But I grew up in a very feminist environment, and even, my parents, I don't think they realized what they were doing, but based on their experiences and their upbringing, but they always said, we want you guys to be self-sufficient, have a career, do something with yourself, so if you ever get married and something happens, you have something to fall back on, right? Well, that creates that, well, then I shouldn't have to need a man, right? And so I remember having, I was probably, 23, 24, and I was having dinner with a girlfriend, and she was like 12 years older than me, and she told me one day, Rena, you need to allow yourself to need men. And I was like, I don't need them. I can do this. And she said, you're never going to get married. You're never going to find someone and get married because you don't allow yourself to need them. I didn't get that until I understood that it was because it's something that men, that's how they're created. They need to be needed. And so when I'm doing stuff and I don't ask my husband for help and I'm struggling and he sees me struggle, that affects him, right? So the biggest complaint that I get in the counseling room from men is she just doesn't need me. It's not we fight over money, our communication stinks. Like people think it's always that. But when it comes to our couples counseling, the husband always says, she just doesn't need me. That's huge. That's huge. Now, you don't have to be needy, whiny. That's not what I'm talking about. We're talking about allowing yourself to rely on your husband or on that in the male in your life. I remember when I learned this, I went home and I cried and I thought, I was such a terrible daughter. I felt awful because I treated my dad the way that I thought I was supposed to, right? I'm growing up now. I don't need you. Even though inside I knew I needed him, but I also missed that he needed me to need him, So that was huge for me. the other piece for that for men is they're fixers, right? How many of you guys would agree with that? Fixers? Yeah. So if your role is to fix something, like if that's just in you to fix something and no one needs you to fix something, how are you going to feel? Unappreciated, disrespected, not needed, right? And those are the top three issues for men in our society today. They don't feel appreciated, they feel disrespected, and they don't feel needed. And I think that is huge, and we can change that by just understanding men how they are, and men understanding how we are. My husband and I took this workshop where we learned a lot of this together. We were only dating at the time. We almost broke up during this because it was like, even I went into it thinking, man, I'm neurotic. This will be kind of cool to find out a little bit more about myself. And I walked out of there going, whoa, like no wonder men think we're complicated, right? Because we are. But the one thing that was really interesting was the instructor went around the room and said, how many of you guys have felt unsafe in the last year? It was a room maybe about 200 to 300 people. And I would say less than half raised their hand. And then she said, how about the last 6 months? Less hands went up. Last 3 months, less hands went up. Last month, maybe like 1 or 2 hands. She said, today, how many of you guys felt unsafe today? No hands went up. And then she did the same thing with the women. All hands went up with a year. How many felt unsafe in the last 6 months? All hands went up. 3 months, all hands went up. Last month, all hands went up. Today, a good portion of the hands went up, including mine. And my husband looks at me. Mind you, we're only dating, right, at the time, and he says, you felt unsafe? You've been with me the whole day. Because he's thinking, he drove us to this workshop. He just protected me. He's taking care of me through this process, right? And I was like, yeah, it was this car that was driving. It was too close. And he was like, what? He was like, that is unbelievable. But I remember that being such an eye-opener for me as well, and it helped me understand why I reacted to certain things. Because when we feel unsafe, we get controlling. So after that, any time that my behavior started changing, my husband would say, are you feeling unsafe? Did something I say make you feel unsafe right now? And that was like a game changer. I'd be like, yeah, I think so. Let me think about it, right? I had to think about it because it was so natural to just respond with the controlling behavior, right? Soothe, please, all that stuff. That I really had to take a step back and go, wait a minute, why am I trying to control right now? Why am I trying to, affect him in this way? And it changed the way that we engaged each other during situations that I think otherwise it would have been a huge fight.
Mm-hmm. One of the interesting things for me, even from a church standpoint, okay, going back, my first introduction of going to church it was pretty much dominated by women leadership. I remember looking, going, where are the dudes? And why aren't more guys not stepping up and anteing up? But according to whatever culture you come from, this is not like shaming guys, that every guy is like Raymond or Archie Bunker or whoever. But there has been a lot of the emasculation of the male that I think is presented out there as a norm, which it's not. But, for Barb and I it's like you really do. We're equal in God's sight, but we got different roles and responsibilities, and we're wired differently. But back to the church thing, I just didn't. The only dude outside of the pastor really that was up front, the choir, the little church we went to, the choir was all women. And you may have a male choir director or a female, but the dudes, they'd walk outside Old Baptist church after church, and they would fire up a throat rocket, burn offering, right? Firing up a heater cigarette after church. And I was like, the dudes are not doing anything as far as participating in any liable role in there, but they'll get together out there and shoot the breeze when it's over. And I'm like, this is weird. I think creating a masculine culture and a feminine culture where both uniqueness is appreciated and valued is crucial. And I think even the church got away from it.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of been our downfall as a church. And we see it now with, I think, the church is trying to make up for it by trying to encourage men, to lead their homes. And, you hear all these, Christian bands, come out with songs that talk about the man leading the church, the home. And, and that's great. But I do think that in not understanding how men are wired, we've kind of dropped the ball. If we could engage men with how they're wired and help them understand how much they are needed in the church, then I think that would make a bigger difference. But because we've just kind of let it slide, and the women have just kind of done it. Why? Because they feel unsafe. And so when a woman feels unsafe, someone has to step up and be the leader of the house. Someone has to be the spiritual leader, so the woman will do it, right? Yep. And so if we understood why things are happening, and then we allowed ourselves through that understanding to switch the roles to how they're supposed to be, it would make a big difference.
One of the interesting things, if you go back and study it, for real, where the Industrial Revolution, it jacked with the family big time. Because before, the guys would go to work and their sons would go with them oftentimes into the fields or building or whatever they were doing. Once guys started going to the factory, the kids then were left at home, and the mom became the primary spokesperson into their world, which is great. I mean, if you got a godly wife, Suzanne Wesley, the influence she had on John and Charles is unreal when you go back and study it. But the problem was the young boys growing up, Dad was not only staying at the factory 40 hours, he was staying there about 60 hours. Okay? That was a huge thing. Then you factor in the whole women's lib movement that started making a huge push. And to me, that's where we've seen the rearrangement of roles and responsibilities. And a lot of young boys growing up have never had a masculine, God-centered dad that was trying to draw the masculinity out of them, as well as shepherd the heart of their female daughter.
Right. Yeah, and that is, I think, where in understanding this, as moms, as women who have influence over boys, we can help that by having the understanding that he's a boy. There's nothing wrong with him, right? We talked about how so many diagnoses have come out of not understanding the differences between male and female. This is why boys are diagnosed with ADHD way more than girls, because we've seen the physical behavior that boys need to be able to process and do things as a negative, right? And so that's problematic. But if we can understand that, then as well with men, right? Men understanding how women process and how we're wired, then it'll change how they respond to their daughters, friends, that kind of stuff, which I think could make a huge difference in families as well as in the church.
Rena made this statement the other day I thought was good, kind of wrapping up this piece of it, if you will. But you said for a female, everything screams loud at her. Mm-hmm. And I was like, hit that, because even when you were talking about that, I was like, that is so good. Because like Barb and Hannah, I watch them. Rachel's wired a little different, if you will. But them two girls, I mean, Hannah's almost a mini Barb. Okay, that's just the way it is. Rachel's, she's more like her dad in areas, which is really, really awful for her. But like, honestly, they walk into the living room, they're pushing the leather seat sofa thing together. They've got now we got more pillows. I don't even know when we got all these pillows. But, John, you were over there the other day. I mean, Hannah and Barb will organize, fluff the pillows, they got everything. They're looking at it, and I'm like, and then the same thing in the bedroom. I'm like, Barb, why do we have to have that many pillows on the bed for real? Because every time I get ready to go to sleep, I'm thinking, I still got a good 20 minutes before I, no. But everything screams loud. When she was saying that, it's like, did you lay down on the bed because that pillow's out? Or she comes into my office and goes, that picture over there next to the window, how long has it been crooked like that? And I said, since the last time you straightened it, I think, whenever the last time you were in here. But Rena was telling me, for women, everything screams loud at you. And I don't think it's that way for dudes. It's like, y'all hush for a second, man. This is the ninth inning. This is going to be, I want to see how this game ends. There ain't but one thing screaming at me. I want to see how the game ends. Everything is screaming. Whether whether the coffee's ground, whether the trash is taken out. I'm like, that is not even whispering over here in my ear.
Right. But I think this is why, like, you'll hear women say, and I hear it a lot in mom groups, like I feel like I'm going crazy. Because literally everything is screaming at us. And, I know there's times where I'd be hanging out with male friends, and we'd be in line, let's say at Starbucks, and there's this lady in front of me, and there's a hair on the back of her shirt. You all know what I'm talking about, ladies, right? You have this urge to just pull it off. Not because there's anything wrong with it, but it's screaming at you. It doesn't belong there. It needs to be removed. You guys are laughing because you know what I'm talking about. I thought I was neurotic. I thought I was crazy. I thought there was something wrong with me until I learned that was just me being a female. Go figure, right? So we have to be aware of that, because I think that also we have to know when we need a break, because what we do to take a break is we zone out. And so being able to remove ourselves from situations where everything is going to be loud and be able to veg is important, because everything does scream at us. So there's this one gal that I heard one time share her experience with this, and it was really funny. So she said she was going to go take a shower, and so she went and turned on the water. And when she turned on the water, she remembered that she had left the stove on. So she ran downstairs to turn the stove off. And when she did that, she saw there was a couple dishes in the sink and thought, it's just 2 dishes. I'm just going to go ahead and put them in the dishwasher. So she rinsed the dishes. She put them in the dishwasher. When she closed the dishwasher, she remembered that she forgot to start the laundry. So she went, to the laundry room, started the laundry. And then at that point, she runs into her husband. And her husband says, I thought you went to take a shower. And then she's like, oh, I did. But, I came downstairs and I did this. He goes, but the water's running. She's like, oh, yeah. Goes upstairs to take a shower. That's how loud those things are for us, is whatever is the loudest is what's going to take priority. So a little note to you guys. You want to take priority, you're going to have to be the loudest thing. Not yelling. You're going to have to be the loudest thing for her. So that means you're going to have to be in her line of sight, right, for her to be able to see you and address the need that's there. But
it's interesting. If you're watching online, I pray that you've been encouraged. Have a great night.